Okay, our Twitter question of the day has to do with how sports and politics and or social issues have meshed once again in our society. We're getting ready for the Final Four in Indianapolis, and many of you are probably familiar with the new law that was signed by Governor Mike Pence in Indiana, the Religious Freedom Law, and a lot of people are outraged that the Final Four is going to be held in Indianapolis. So the Twitter question is, should the Final Four be held in Indianapolis this upcoming weekend? Charles Barkley says no. Pat Hayden, USC's athletic director, came out and said, I'm not going to even go to Indianapolis. My son is gay, and I'm not going to even bother going to that state. NASCAR, which is not some bastion of diversity, has come out against this law. The NCAA, the fact that the NCAA is getting the moral high ground on anything is astounding. They have come out against this. Being Wednesday and the Final Four being on Saturday, should the Final Four be moved?
It's just not practical. I mean, you would like to say yes, but there'll be protests if the law isn't fixed as to what those concerned want it fixed. But there'll be protests. There'll be much public debate. But I just don't think it. You can move the games to you can play basketball anywhere and find a gym. But you're talking about hundreds of thousands of hotel rooms, people who are flying out to see these teams. I mean, that is a bigger issue that you can't solve in 3 days logistically. So, should it be moved? Great argument for it, and that would be the ultimate stand. Chad, I don't think it's practical in a 3-day window to say we're going to uproot the Final Four and move it to, say, New Orleans. I do think in the future, if this isn't fixed, you're going to see some combines in New Orleans. You're going to see a lot more Final Fours in New Orleans. And I saw in Indianapolis, I was just there, that's where the NCAA's headquarters are, right downtown. I mean, there's going to be a lot of pressure for those businesses to react to this if this doesn't change.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think logistically it's impossible to move it just because of all those other things, the hotel, the media, all that other stuff. You can play a bat, you can go to Highlands Ranch Rec Center and play the game and have a great game, but all the other pieces of the puzzle would be too difficult to do in such a short period of time. But we're at a very interesting in time in America where there's a number of large companies who already come out against this law. And now just the point of the NCAA, are they going to move their headquarters? Will this end the Indy 500? You know, you're talking about NASCAR, and now we're talking about, that's an iconic event in the state as well. So it'll be very interesting how they try to unravel all of this, even as the law is being worked and possibly being reworded or wording added to it to make it a little bit more inclusive.
So if you want to chime in on this topic, all you have to do is do at Chad Brown 94, at Troy Rank, at Eric Goodman. I want to go a little bit more in depth on this story, and I don't want this to turn into a political discussion, but all of us are familiar with this specific issue. I'm not going to downplay it and say this is much ado about nothing, because this law is a federal law. Okay, this Religious Freedom Act is a law. This is a law as well in other states. But let me put it this way. This law by itself, I think, is a good thing. So that's A right here. I think the problem for Indiana is not having B attached to it. And B is, in the state of Indiana, they don't have a law that protects the gay community. And I think that's where the outrage is. It's not the actual law itself. Would you agree?
Well, it is a law because the law it specifically excludes a class of people. So,
but there could have been a law that protected gays well before Pence signed this new law. They just never did it.
I think it's you can always tell who considers themselves to be the winner and the loser of a law by who gets out and publicly says we won.
Right.
The anti-gay folks, the very fundamentalist folks, very right-leaning folks, consider this to be a victory for themselves. So it's clear how they view the law. The folks on who lean a little bit more left and are more accepting of alternative lifestyles, they consider this to be a discrimination law. So it's clear what the law means in the court of public opinion, and it's going to be, I think, difficult for this law to stay as it is because the state of Indiana is going to lose so much business. I mean, big corporations like Apple are coming out against and saying they're not going to do any business with the state. So that's a significant blow to the economy, and the governor has to pay attention to that.
Yeah, I don't think they have any choice. I mean, the governor, it's been interesting. He's basically said he was shocked by the criticism, shocked by the blowback, if you will, and that he didn't understand why anything had to change, but I guess I have to change something. I mean, he reluctantly said it.
Right.
And
he doesn't want to lose his base. That's the problem. Yeah. This is a political issue.
Right, but to Chad's point, when you start talking about major corporations and major events pulling out of the state of Indiana,
right,
whether it's the Combine, which is a huge moneymaker, whether it's Final Fours it seems like every 4 years there, the NCAA headquarters recently relocated there from Overland Park, Kansas, the Indy 500. I mean, go down the chain of events that, I mean, at some point, that the vocal, I don't want to say it's a minority, but the greater good for the state and for Indianapolis, the city, becomes in question. Because it's easy to take this stand now when everyone's still participating in your events, but if you start talking about people not doing commerce with you, I mean, you see how that works on an international level when people stop doing commerce with you. But 19 states have this, if I'm not correct.
Yeah.
So it's not that, and I think that's
the law's not the law.
It's the amendment that's lacking here,
exactly,
or the fact that there was nothing in front of it prior to this law to protect. But that's what he keeps saying, the governor. 19 other states have it. It's just no big deal, and it's like, well, it is, because you don't have any anti-discrimination law or amendment to protect.
And that's the problem when you have your MSNBCs and your Foxes of the world. One side, Fox will say 19 states have it.
Right.
Right?
Which is correct.
And then MSNBC will say Indiana hates all gays.
Right.
There is a middle ground here, guys.
Right.
And that's what I think nobody's talking about, and that's why I think it was important to talk about it on this show, because I don't want to say necessarily we're all in agreement on this, but I think it's important to put some perspective on this as much as anything.
The perspective is they wrote a law to appeal to a certain part of the population who considered it to be a victory for themselves, and now they're acting shocked that there's pushback. That's the reality of the situation. And is there a gray area in the middle? And do both sides have some facts on their side? That's always the case. The truth is somewhere always in the middle. But the purpose of this law was not to include people. It was to exclude people.
One more thing on this topic. Years ago, and all of us remember this, the state of Indiana in Indianapolis has a lot to lose if they don't make any changes. The state of Arizona had very little to lose. They were just going to lose maybe a Super Bowl or two for not making Martin Luther King Day
Correct. I was living in Arizona
a holiday. And they buckled under the pressure. I cannot imagine Mike Pence isn't sitting at his desk right now, even if he loses some of his constituents, saying, we cannot cripple our economy. We have to do something about this. Don't you think the people that support him would see that?
The people who stood up on stage, being very happy that this law was passed.
Right.
They're ideologists, and their ideology trumps other things. So to try to appeal to common sense, which I'm sure the governor is going to try to do, is going to be very difficult, because that's someone's ideology. They're closely held beliefs. Right. And they think that is wrong. Therefore, the state losing money is just a sacrifice we all have to make.
Yeah, to find compromise with someone whose ideology is so firm and so rigid is almost impossible. So there's going to be upset people in this, as there are now.
Right.
The problem is he's trying to satisfy people in-house, people he sees every day, but there's so much outside influence that he can't survive that. Or the state, I would think in theory, if they start just buildings and moving vans leaving Indiana, that's a different issue than satisfying your constituents at a local level.
Yeah, can you imagine the Irsay family packing up a Mayflower truck and moving back to Baltimore?
You can see it.
That would be something.
Be a great 30 for 30.
Yes.